This week in Billionaires, despite the Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl 60 victory, Chairwoman Jody Allen must sell the team as executor of her late brother Paul Allen's will, with all proceeds going to charity. The franchise, purchased for $194 million in 1997 and now valued at over $7 billion, will see no profit for the family. Following the Portland Trailblazers' impending sale that's expected to close this spring, insiders anticipate that the Seahawks will soon be on the market, making this championship ring a final gift. Newly released Department of Justice files reveal real estate mogul Mortimer Zuckerman and banking heiress Ariane de Rothschild as previously unknown billionaire clients who appear to have paid Jeffrey Epstein a combined $45 million between 2013 and 2015. Although officially for estate planning and possibly other financial services, experts call the fees extremely high. De Rothschild's payments appear to coincide with Epstein aiding her bank in a sensitive U.S. government settlement. These $45 million in fees help explain a significant portion of the unknown $103 million in Epstein's firm's accounts, raising questions about whether his clients were paying for financial services or something else entirely. Melinda French Gates is charting a bold new path after her divorce, armed with $12.5 billion to reshape philanthropy on her own terms. Having left the Gates Foundation in 2024, she has moved on to her own organization, Pivotal, with a laser focus on the significantly underfunded issues affecting women and girls. Speaking with Forbes, she pointed out a startling statistic. Organizations dedicated to women and girls receive only about 2% of U.S. philanthropic dollars, a gap she intends to close. This shift comes as she anticipates the great wealth transfer, where women are poised to inherit trillions of dollars by 2030, giving them unprecedented financial power. Guided by Warren Buffett's advice to find her main goal, she is moving away from trying to lead every movement herself and instead backing the experts already doing the work. Welcome to Beyond the Billions. I'm Giacomo Tognini at Forbes, and joining me today is Rich Nieva. Rich, you were on here a few months ago to talk about Google. Now you're on here to talk about Sam Altman. With AI being like more than 50% of what we talk about, are you ready to take over the show and hosting duties?
I mean, yeah, maybe, yeah, co-host. You got a lot to teach me, so I'll
No. I always learn so much from you and your stories. And specifically, you and our colleague Anna Tong just wrote this incredible profile of Sam Altman, who has obviously been in the news so much, in recent times and also over recent years. It was a cover story of our latest issue. Tell us a bit about sort of what was the experience like of meeting him and his office and all these incredible details you guys talked about in the story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the wildest thing was, it was our lead, but he came in and he showed us, these crazy artifacts that he's collected over the years, a stick of uranium, a 40,000-year-old like Stone Age like hand axe, and a Bronze Age sword. And these were like things that he's talked about these in interviews, but nobody has really seen them. And so we go in. We had two interviews with him, and so we went to the OpenAI office. On our first interview, we asked him, hey, we've heard about this stuff. Can you bring it for next time? And he said yes. And so, I think the most striking thing was just, and like pretty endearing, was how into it he was. It was kind of like he was at show and tell. And he was trying really hard to like present them in chronological order.
In terms of like the age
right.
of each. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So he started with the hand axe, and then like progressed to like AI. What he's doing. He showed us like a one of the GPU chips that an early version of ChatGPT was trained on, and so things like that. That was definitely the wildest moment.
It's also like incredible, like as a reporter, when you're interviewing someone and you can like picture how you're going to start writing the story, like the lead. And I imagine when you guys asked him to bring those things, that he actually brought them. It was it just crystallized. That's what it was gonna how you're going to start the story. And
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
No, I mean, like we were like, oh yes, like this story writes itself at that point. Yeah.
And another reason that the story sort of came at an interesting time is because right, it was for our Greatest American Innovators issue and list. So why now? I guess to talk to Sam Altman, obviously CEO of OpenAI. Where were you catching him in this moment when you interviewed him?
Yeah, well, we kind of felt that, he is arguably, one of the most important business leaders in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and OpenAI is arguably one of the most important companies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI is obviously everywhere, and he's been the face of AI. He didn't invent it, but he's just kind of been this like standard bearer for it. And so we looked at it kind of that way, like who is this guy who is like commanding so much of the economy right now? Like a lot has been made of his $1.4 trillion, commitments to
Mm-hmm.
data centers. And so who is this guy? He has so much power. How did he get it? And just kind of how is he thinking about everything? How is he thinking about the future?
And I think you guys really, you know, um, illustrated in your story sort of kind of like what makes him tick and how he thinks through things. But when you were talking to him, did he carry around a sort of an air of being someone who is, so important and, so central to all these debates we're having about AI? Like how did he come across when you were speaking to him?
Yeah, no, he did not come off as somebody like that. He's very soft spoken. I think that's something that came up a few times, in our
Mm-hmm.
interviews. We did an interview with Bob Iger, the
Mm-hmm.
CEO of Disney. And it's something that he pointed out, that he's so soft spoken, he's almost whispering. Um, and he's got this really low key Midwestern demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
He's from St. Louis, so far away from Silicon Valley. Um, so he's just very casual. During our interviews, at a couple of points, he would sit cross-legged. And so it just, that's his vibe. He's instead of somebody who's being really intense all the time. And it seems to have served him well. He's known
Mm-hmm.
as this kind of this big deal maker, and I think that sort of vibe can be disarming.
Mm-hmm. And how obviously there's all this continuing excitement about AI and continued investment in it, but there's also sort of the flip side of the disruption, right? And the fears and worries about it, which you both touch on in the story as well. How did he respond to these worries that and fears that people have about the impact that AI is having and is going to have in the future?
Yeah, he's been pretty upfront about the risks. He talks about these big threats, like AI creating bioweapons, or people
Mm-hmm.
getting too attached to AI. There's been some wrongful death lawsuits against OpenAI, job displacement. I think the sort of overarching um, message of how he responds to that was he thinks we should just release AI a little bit at a time, and just start to see how people are using it. Um, and I think the idea is, have society sort of catch up in real time, and decide how to deal with these things. And so that's kind of always been the way he sees things, is just get it out there and see how people kind of react to it and adapt to these things.
Mm-hmm. Rather than sort of thinking about it ahead of time, just sort of see how people
Yeah,
react
yeah,
react to it.
yeah. And that's also been something that people have been critical of.
Mm-hmm.
How do you mitigate these things more?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's kind of it's the trade-off that he's looking at.
And so if we go back to sort of before he became, world famous for OpenAI, what was his background? Sort of, what did he do in school? What were his sort of first gigs and investments, before the
Mhm.
OpenAI period of his life?
Yeah, so he went to Stanford. Um, he was a computer science major. He wanted to study AI, but
Mm-hmm.
he said it was just kind of too early. It wasn't really real yet, and so he got deterred. Um, he then, the social boom, happened.
Hmm.
He started a social company called Looped, which was a way to share your location with friends. And through that, he joined Y Combinator, which was
Hmm.
just very, burgeoning. He was in the first batch.
Hmm.
And so that kind of kicked off his career. Um, he joined there and eventually ran the place. Paul Graham
Hmm.
was very impressed by him. We talked to him for the story as well. He said that, walking up to him, he could tell that, this must be what Bill Gates was like, when he was very
Hmm.
young. Um, and so that relationship has been very fruitful for him, just as he became, who he is today.
And there was a bit of sort of a dramatic arc, right, with his time at Y Combinator. He was Paul Graham's heir apparent, took it over, but then things started to shift, right, leading into the time at OpenAI. Could you sort of walk us through a little bit of how that all played out?
Sure. Yeah. So he was the president of Y Combinator.
Hmm.
And the thing that people kind of criticize about Sam Altman is that he may lack focus.
Hmm.
He's got his attention on a lot of different things. So he starts OpenAI as a side project, and eventually it kind of becomes the thing that he is most obsessed about. He
Hmm.
starts working on it more and more, and kind of starts to neglect uh, Y Combinator. Y Combinator's partners notice, and eventually, kind of make him choose. They say,
Hmm.
recommit to Y Combinator, or step down, and he did. He did OpenAI full time. We asked him about that, and he kind of copped to it.
Hmm.
He said that the flack was well deserved. Um, but yeah, there's this criticism of Altman that he has this sort of shiny object syndrome. And we're actually seeing that play out today as well at
Hmm.
OpenAI. They're doing a lot of different things, and kind of, um, people are worried uh, that they're doing too much.
Right. There's the sort of the deal with Jony Ive, the former Apple designer, for the sort of the hardware. I think they launched a browser. There's a lot of different things they're getting into, right, beyond like your base ChatGPT business,
Mhm.
right, at this point.
Yeah, there's Sora, there is
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
So, what were sort of the? I mean, I feel like the story of OpenAI's beginnings is kind of known, but if you can briefly sort of say like how it first came to be. Obviously, Elon Musk was involved,
Mhm.
and then very publicly is no longer involved, and that's sort of playing out a lot now. But how did it sort of come to be, and when did it sort of shift to how it is today, basically?
Yeah, so OpenAI started in the YC universe.
Hmm.
Altman was president of YC at the time, and so just that really lent the project a lot of credibility.
Hmm.
He recruited Greg Brockman, who at the time was CTO of Stripe, a YC company, and yeah, he helped recruit Elon to invest 38 million. And he said that Elon was a personal hero of his, and along the way, obviously that soured.
Hmm.
Elon is suing OpenAI now, for his early contributions, and that suit kind of really hinges on OpenAI restructuring in 2019 to add a for-profit arm.
Hmm.
And there's lots of palace intrigue, and kind of two sides to it. Um, Elon says that he was opposed to the restructuring. OpenAI says that he wasn't, but wanted to run it and couldn't, and so that's why he's
Hmm.
mad. Um, and so there's no love lost between them. The trial is scheduled for April. And actually, Sam Altman tweeted yesterday that he is very excited to get Elon on the stand and on the record, and he said it'll be Christmas in April. So it's these two guys, like, you know there is no love lost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just it'll be really fascinating to see how like that actually plays out in court. Any depositions, and I guess to the point of it now being, that shift from a nonprofit to a for-profit entity, something that you often hear and that he gets asked a lot, which you guys cite in the story, is that you'd think he'd be a lot richer than he is, right? But he
Mhm.
doesn't have a stake in OpenAI. So how did you sort of approach asking him about that and sort of his reasoning behind that being the case?
Yeah, it's funny. We asked him about it, and he said he doesn't have a good answer. And he joked that maybe he should have a stake, so he doesn't get asked that question anymore. But it is fascinating, and he said that it kind of is this like conspiracy theory producing thing. Um, he is rich. He's not that.
Hmm.
He's not
He's a
like
billionaire. Yeah.
he's a billionaire. Yeah, Forbes has estimated his net worth at three billion. But that comes from his personal investments. He's
Hmm.
got over 400 investments of his own, and so when people talk about his lack of focus, you could kind of point to that as maybe being a data point there.
Hmm. Well, it's kind of a contrast to Musk saying he needs to have an even bigger stake in Tesla in order to care about it, right? And then
Yeah.
on the flip side, you have Altman who doesn't even have one. Uh, Another thing I want to talk to you about is sort of with with this talks of this incredible spending in AI he wants to do over the next few decades, right? I think more than a trillion, and also President Trump's, you know, plans to foster more investment in AI data centers, right? There's the Stargate project, right, with OpenAI and SoftBank and Oracle to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on data centers. Do you see Altman as being aligned with Trump on this? I know in recently Altman has come out to sort of express his concerns, I guess, rather than criticize the shootings by ICE agents in Minneapolis, but also he called Trump a strong leader. Where do you sort of see him as being aligned with the Trump administration on these AI priorities?
Yeah, so we asked him about this, and we did our interview, before lots of what happened with ICE.
Mm-hmm.
But we asked him about his relationship with the president, and he said he'll work with any president, and that it's kind of the duty for anybody building powerful technology in the U.S. to work with
Mm-hmm.
the president. He says he's been easy to work with. He did contrast that with the Biden administration and trying to build out data centers there, and he said that was very difficult. Um, he did say that there are places where he thinks that they disagree. He and the Trump administration. He thinks that OpenAI, is for the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's for all of humanity, and the president kind of has, a responsibility to make sure that America wins, which Altman said that he does understand, but there is some opposition in kind of the nationalistic approach versus kind of being internationally minded.
Mm-hmm. OpenAI obviously is kind of synonymous with the AI boom, right? With ChatGPT being the early leader. But Google, as we talked about the last time we were on, has really caught up a lot, right? With Gemini, Anthropic, which was formed by sort of former OpenAI employees, right? Has gotten huge, and there's talk of IPOs of Anthropic and maybe even OpenAI this year or next year. How do you see it's a big question, right? But like, how do you see OpenAI faring now against the competition, right? When it's a much more competitive landscape than when they burst on the scene with ChatGPT a few years ago, right?
Yeah. I mean, they do have really strong competitors. Altman kind of famously issued a code red because of how
Mm-hmm.
good Google's Gemini 3 was. Anthropic is doing really well in the enterprise. OpenAI has always been consumer first.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked him about sort of um, Anthropic and how they're doing in the enterprise. And OpenAI has, they've just kind of released a new enterprise package, and so they are starting to focus on that this year. I think that'll be a big focal point this year for them. He thinks one way that they could kind of advance the state of the art is with a new family of devices that they're working on,
Hmm.
consumer devices. They are working on that with Jony Ive, who is, the Apple legend designer, who designed the iPhone, iPod,
Hmm.
you name it, the Apple Watch. Um, he is very kind of hush hush about like what that'll actually look like. We
Right.
tried to get a few details out of him. The most interesting thing he said was that he wants it to be very assistive and proactive, and so he called it this, a friendly little companion that like might sit on your desk. And he gave the example of, in our story, he showed us all of these artifacts that he brought into his office.
Hmm.
He said, what if an AI device could help sort of plan that show and tell? It could tell me, what artifacts that would kind of demonstrate this progression of human innovation. Um, it could see what I'm most interested in, because it can track where my eyes go in the room while I'm working and I'm looking at all of these different objects in my office. And he said that in the future, maybe a robot or an AI could actually physically help to pack up all these
Hmm.
things and bring them into the office. And so that's kind of hypothetically what he's thinking, the sort of moonshot vision of it is. But it's interesting to see what it'll actually be in terms of this thing that goes to market, because so many of these things have flopped,
Hmm.
including um, a product called the AI pin, which he backed,
Hmm.
and so yeah, these things are really hard to just be able to get consumers to actually use these things, keep using them, have them gain traction. So that'll be a big challenge for them.
Yeah, and like considering the amount of money they spent on that deal, right? It'll be really interesting to see where it pans out. But
Yeah.
speaking to his vision that he talked to you both about in the story, when you asked him about succession plans, he mentioned that he would like to pass, you know, the management of OpenAI to an AI model at some point. Right? How much do you think that was him being, realistic versus, you know, it being a nice narrative? What did you make of that? As a reporter, as someone who's obviously living through this age that we all are now with AI, what did you think about that?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. He seemed dead serious.
Mm-hmm.
That could also be hubris,
Mm-hmm.
which he has certainly shown in the past. Um, but if you are to take him for his word, like that is what he plans to do. That said, that seems very difficult, for a company like OpenAI to be run by an AI. They've always said kind of in their vision of AGI, that like the idea is to have AIs that could be as productive as employees and eventually run companies. Um, so it is a nice narrative for them to kind of say that they'll do that, but it seems very far. But yeah, the conviction that he had when he said that seemed real.
I mean, he's going to be dominating the news cycle for a long while. I imagine between the trial and everything else going on with OpenAI. But Rich, as always, it's been so great to have you on. Keep following your stories. I urge everyone watching to read that fantastic cover story from you and Anna on Sam Altman, and probably have you on again soon to discuss more AI and tech stories.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
You can find Rich's story and the other stories we discussed in this episode in the show notes.